Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. So we're changing it up a little bit this morning. I want to introduce to you one of the great personalities in Jewish history, Rav Shmuel Hannagid. Rav Shmuel Hannagid is considered the first generation of Rishonim, which means he came right after the Gaonim. He was born in Cordova in 993. He passed away in Granada in 1055. Shmuel Hannagid was a student of Rav Chanoich. Who is Rav Chanoich? So, if you want to understand Jewish history, this is probably the most important episode you need to be familiar with, the story of the Arba Shvuyim, the four captives. We spoke about this many times, where four Rabbanim were setting sail from Bari, Italy, and their ship was attacked by pirates, and four great scholars were redeemed by four communities throughout Europe, and it really transferred the balance of power from Bavel to Europe. So, for example, Rav Shmaryahu was sold to Alexandria. Rav Chushiel was the father of Rabbeinu Hananel, was sold on the African coast, and Rav Moshe ben Chanoich was redeemed in Spain. So that's basically, if you ever wanted to know how did Torah get from Bavel, Babylonia, the Babylonian academies, to Europe, to Spain, to North Africa, to Egypt, it was through this episode of the Daled Shvuyim. So Rav Moshe ben Chanoich comes to Cordova. He's one of the four captives. He was taken over by his son, Rabbeinu Chanoich. Now Rabbeinu Chanoich had a student. Rabbi Chanoich's student was Shmuel Hannagid. Okay? So Rabbi Chanoich's student was Shmuel Hannagid. Shmuel Hannagid is considered a first generation Rishon. Other examples of first generation Rishonim were Rabbeinu Hananel and Rabbeinu Nissim Gaon. So let's say you open up a Gemara Brachos, you look on the side of the page, you have Rav Nissim Gaon, first generation Rishon. You have Rav Hananel was first generation Rishon, again the son of Rav Chushiel, and Shmuel Hannagid. Shmuel Hannagid became a mechutin with Rav Nissim Gaon, so they were mechutanim as well. Okay, so now Rav Chanoich ben Moshe was the student of his father, Rav Moshe ben Chanoich. During his lifetime, no one opposed him. He had a great patron. His name was, you might be familiar with this name, Chizdai ibn Shaprut. You ever hear that name? Chizdai ibn Shaprut. And what happened was that after Rav Moshe passed away, his son Rav Chanoich was the leader of Spanish Jewry, but it was challenged by Rav Yosef ibn Avisor, who was also a student of his father Rav Chanoich. There was a great split in the community, and in order to put the strife to bed, Rav Chanoich had to put Rav Yosef into Cherem. So, you know, if you think that splits in communities and between different kehilos are a new phenomenon, you know, as they say, it's as old as the hills. So basically, who is Shmuel Hannagid? Shmuel Hannagid is a storekeeper. He is a master of many disciplines. For example, sciences, mathematics, calligraphy, Arabian poetry, language. In the year 1012, Cordova is torn by civil war, and Suleiman is victorious, and Shmuel Hannagid has to run away. Here's a very important legend about Shmuel Hannagid. Shmuel Hannagid is he's a shopkeeper, and his store is located near Chabus of Granada. Who's Chabus of Granada? He's the king of Granada. Spain had different regions, so Chabus is the king. The vizier is a guy by the name of Al-Arif. One day, the maidservant of Al-Arif asks Shmuel, the shopkeeper, if he could write some letters to the master. So Shmuel Hannagid composes some letters to Al-Arif. Al-Arif is amazingly impressed by Shmuel Hannagid's writing talent. So he said, you know, I'm the vizier of the king, and I'm writing these really bad letters on behalf of the king, I should start using, they didn't have AI back then, I should start using Shmuel Hannagid to write my letters for me. So secretly, Shmuel Hannagid was writing all the letters for Al-Arif on behalf of King Chabas. Al-Arif is on his sickbed. He's about to die. King Chabas says, "Oy vey, what's going to be with me? I'm not going to have a visor." He said, "I'll tell you the truth. I didn't do anything. It was all this shopkeeper, Shmuel Hannagid." Shmuel Hannagid became the Nugget, the prince, because he ascended in universal greatness to the extent where there's actually a palace in Spain. One of the most famous palaces is called the Alhambra Palace. It's attributed that he owned this palace. That's how powerful Shmuel Hannagid was. And so again, he's now the visor of King Chabas. King Chabas dies in 1037. There's a big split. Who should succeed the king? Shmuel Hannagid sided with the Das Yechidim, of the minority party, to favor the older son Badis. However, the majority followed the younger son. Rav Shmuel Hannagid, through his genius, was able to allow Badis to wrestle free the power, and he became the king of Granada. So Badis, the oldest son of Chabas, becomes the king of Granada, and Shmuel Hannagid became the second most important person in the entire world, because he's the visor of the one who succeeded the king of Granada. So he establishes a major Talmudic academy. He gives daily Shiurim. He had a tremendous library. He wrote many compendiums on grammar, poetry, and philosophy. He spent a lot of money paying for his yeshiva. He became very good friends with Rav Nissim Gaon. Rav Nissim Gaon was a student of Rav Hai Gaon, and Rav Nissim Gaon and Shmuel Hannagid became mechutanim. So I want to share with you something very interesting. If you look in the back of any Masechta on brachos, you have something called Mavoi HaTalmud. It's very interesting. You look in the back of Masechta brachos right after the Rosh. So brachos has 63 blot, right? It ends on Daf Samach Daled. So right after the Masechta, you have the Rosh, and right after the Rosh, you have something called Klalei HaTalmud, the introduction to Gemara. Yeah, I always think it would have been nice if somebody would have given some kind of introduction to Gemara instead of Elam Mitzvah Shalei ve'Elu Chayav Lahachros. Elam Mitzvah, Das is there Mitzvah. You don't know what's a Tashma. Anyway, so I want to share with you just some ideas that are brought in the Mavoi HaTalmud. Mavoi HaTalmud was written by none other than Shmuel Hannagid. I'm gonna tell you one story though. This is a good one. Legend has it, this is brought in the Sefer Shalshelas HaKabbalah of the Ravid, the first, which the story goes like this. One time, the Shmuel Hannagid was walking through the streets, and some guy from a store heaped tremendous insult on Shmuel Hannagid, cursed him out. So the king got very upset. He said to Shmuel Hannagid, "You're the visor, cut off his tongue." So what did Shmuel Hannagid do? He sent the man a very great gift. He sent him a great present. Okay, a little while later, Shmuel Hannagid is passing by with the king, and the man comes out and he hurls on Shmuel Hannagid tremendous compliment. So the king says to Shmuel Hannagid, "I don't understand. I told you to cut off his tongue." Shmuel Hannagid says, "I did. I gave him a present. So his tongue was cut off. He couldn't wag his sharp, evil tongue against me. Now look, you see, now he's only hurling compliments on me." Okay, that's a famous story about Shmuel Hannagid. What I want to discuss this morning is an interesting machlokes, Shmuel Hannagid and the Rambam, regarding something called mechilta. Anybody know what mechilta is? What is a mechilta? We know there's something called Medrash Rabbah. There's something called Medrash Tanchuma. Then there's something called Mechilta. Mechilta is the Torah Sheba'al Peh on Shemais. Sifra is the Torah Sheba'al Peh on Vayikra. Sifra has another name. What else is Sifra known as? Torah's Kohanim. Okay? And then there's the Sifri on Devarim. So Mechilta is Shemois. You say, what happened to Bereshis? There's no halacha on Bereshis. Bereshis just has Medrash. So Medrash is, so to speak, the Agarata, and the Mechilta is the halacha. Mechilta is on Shemois, Sifra is on Vayikra, Sifri is on Devarim. So what's the Shmuel Hannagid says an amazing thing. If you were to break up the Gemara, the Talmud Bavli, into different, if you could identify, sometimes in yeshiva, they ask, okay, what is this? Is this a question? Is this an answer? Is this a proof? But we know there are different kinds of questions. There's Esvei, there's Maskif, there's Masiv, there are proofs, there are questions. How many different, in other words, if you could break up every part of Gemara into different, how many different possibilities can a step in Gemara be? Now, to break up Gemara into one of X number of components, Shmuel Hannagid identifies all the possibilities of what a Gemara can be. So I want to read to you from the beginning. Amar HaMachaber, HaTalmud nechlak l'shnei chalakim. Gemara is broken up into two parts. Mishnah, u'perush HaMishnah. The Mishnah, and the explanation of the Mishnah. HaMishnah hi hanikreis Torah Shebal Peh. Mishnah is called the oral law. V'hi yisoid ha-Torah. This is the foundation of the Torah. Shehatikai mi Moshe Rabbeinu al Vashalom ad yimei Rabbeinu HaKadosh. The Mishnah is the Torah Shebal Peh, which is the foundation of the Torah, which was copied from Moshe until Rebbe. Who's Rebbe? V'hu Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And what else is he called? He's called Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Why is he called Rabbeinu HaKadosh? V'nikra Kadosh, Shemiyamav leihichnis yadai min ha'avnei ulamata. He's called holy because he never in his life put his hands below his waist. Why did he write the oral law? Ki kasa l'man tamad yamarabim. He wrote it to preserve it. Pentishkach milev hakaram v'toived. Lest it be forgotten. So you have Mishnah, then you have the commentary to the Mishnah. The commentary to the Mishnah, v'haperush hazeh yischalek gamhu l'shnei chalakim. The commentary could also be broken up into two parts. Number one, ha'echad halacha mekuyemes, v'habeis halacha dechuya. The Gemara is also broken up into two parts. Part one is the halacha we hold like. Part two is the halacha we don't hold like. The halacha we hold like is what God told Moshe. The halacha we don't hold like is what God didn't tell Moshe. So you ask a question, why in the world would anybody put into a body of information the halacha we don't hold like and what Hashem didn't tell Moshe? I mean, it would make everyone's life easier if the Daf Yomi wasn't a 7.5-year cycle, it was a 2.5-year cycle. And maybe instead of doing a blot a day, we could do a half an amud a day. And you'd have a lot more limdim. But what in the world do we need? Why include information God did not tell Moshe? So I know everyone has their philosophical answers. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. No, it's not. God didn't tell this to Moshe. It might be wise. It might help us understand what we do hold like. But the bottom line is, God didn't tell it to Moshe. What?
The Messiah over the years has gotten lost, and that's.
But so just include what's correct. Why include what's not correct? So look what he says. HaMekuyemes hu shalamda mipi Moshe Rabbeinu. What's correct is what we learned from Moshe. Moshe pi hagvura, and Moshe from God. Bein shetei divrei yachid. Whether it's the opinion of a minority. Ben shetei divrei rabbim. K'moshe afar shemakaymai. U'chemoichin hamachloikis hadechuya. He shalai netka mekuyam. Similarly, machloikis, which is pushed away, is shaloi netka, is what was not learned from God and from Moshe. Bein shetei divrei yachid or divrei rabbim. So basically, Talmud Bavli includes good correct information and incorrect information. So you'll ask, V'im yitoy natoyin lama kasar Rabbeinu HaKadosh Hashem dvarim she'inam halacha. Why did Rebbe include in the Mishnah opinions that we don't hold like? You should have just written what we do hold like. You know what the answer is? He said, because Tuchal hashiva, you can answer as follows. Ki hachachamim hakarmainim, the earliest authorities, kol echad ve'echad he'etik lenafshoy mashalamad. All the early Tanaim, they copied over what they learned, whether it was halacha l'maisa or whether it wasn't. In other words, they didn't necessarily know what was halacha l'maisa, what wasn't. So v'chshabar Rabbeinu HaKadosh lahatik hutzrich lichtav oisan adram she'inam halacha. You ready for this? When Rebbe came along, he had to codify even what was not halacha, so that in later generations nobody gets up and says, "Oh, what are you talking about? You say this is halacha? That's what you learned from your Rebbe. I learned from my Rebbe something else." So Rebbe had to write all the opinions and say, this is right and that's wrong. Meaning we need to write the wrong opinions so that we know it's wrong. Because if we only write the correct opinions, later someone's going to come and say, no, my opinion is correct. So therefore Rebbe wrote what's right, and Rebbe wrote what's wrong, and he gave us rules to know what's right and what's wrong. But if we can't have anything coming later and saying, no, you forgot this opinion. So Rebbe had to include all the opinions to know what's correct and what's wrong. This is what I learned. And if he says this is what I learned, yeshivuhu, we're going to respond to him. She'eina halacha mekuyemes. It is not correct. V'chein amar Chazal b'Mesachas Idyos. That's what Chazal say in Idyos. Lama huzkaru divrei yachid bein divrei rabim. Why do we incorporate the view? Why do we codify the view of an individual in the face of the many? Levatla, to say that it's wrong. Shem yavay adam. So that if somebody comes, v'yomer kach v'kach shamati, and says, I heard like this, we say we know that one already, and it's wrong. So that's the inyan of including, whether in the Mishnah or the Gemara, opinions that we don't hold like. So that nobody comes and says later, no, that's not the right conclusion. You forgot about this opinion. No, we didn't forget about everything. We laid everything out there, and we come to a conclusion. So that's the reason, basically, why the incorrect opinions are included. Now, what is Gemara? This is very interesting. Look on the page that begins V'hachilek habez. V'hachilek habez mishnei hachalakim shel perish hamishna. The second part of Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is the commentary to the Mishnah, v'hu haGemara yischalek l'chaf aleph chalakim. Could be one of 21 different categories. Isn't that interesting? There could be a Gemara, could be one of 21 different things. It could be Tosefta. It could be Brisa. So obviously we need to identify what are these things. What is Tosefta? What is Brisa? Perush, commentary. She'ela, a question. Tshuva, an answer. So She'ela is, the Bnei Yeshiva were wondering about this. Like an Iboyi. Kusha, an attack. Peruk, an answer. Tiyufta, a refutation. Siyua, a support. Ramia, a contradiction. Askafta, a powerful question. Hatzracha, why we need two statements. Maisa, a story. Shmaitza, a tradition. Sugya, what's a sugya? Halacha, a teku. Haggadah, hayra, a psak. Shita, shanoi. So basically, Gemara could be one of 21 things. It's interesting that we know that on the Tefillin Shel Rosh, you have a shin. One shin has 3 heads, one shin has 4 heads. You ever wonder, why do we have a 3-headed shin and a 4-headed shin? Why do we have a 3-headed shin and a 4-headed shin? Gemara in Chagiga says that originally, right now we have Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, but we only have 6 orders of the Mishnayos, but they used to have 600 orders of the Mishnayos. So that would have been a very long cycle. If you're learning Mishnah Yomis, let's say, so instead of taking 6 years, it would take
16. No, 600.
It would take 600 years. That's a very long time, 600 years. That could take time. 600 years, that could take a lot of time. So the crown of the Jew is a Tar Shabbat Peh. We allude to it in the two shins. Shin is 300, shin is 300, 600. We wear the Torah on our head. But there's an opinion in Chagiga that there were 700 Siddharim in the Mishnah. So therefore one of the shins has a fourth head to indicate 400. But it comes out, does anybody know how many times Hashem's name is mentioned in Tefillin? 21. Why? Because the Gemara is 21 parts. There are 21 different chalakim of Gemara. So there are 21 different mentions of the name of Hashem. Today I want to talk about Mechilta. If you have a Gemara Brachos, in the Mavai HaTalmud, on the next page, I don't know what happened here. Oh, yeah, you have it. Look on the page that begins with HaTosefta. Okay? HaTosefta hi Shiur HaMishnah. Tosefta is remnants of the Mishnah. You say, what do you mean remnants of the Mishnah? The Mishnah is the Mishnah. No, remnants of the 600 Siddharim. So Tosefta is a remnant of the original Mishnah. And how do you know when something is a Tosefta? When we say Tana, the word Tana signifies Tosefta. When it comes on the heels of the Mishnah, hi halacha mekuyames. And what's Braisa? The Habraisa kol hasfarim shehetiku hakadmoinim achar haMishnah. All the books that the early greats codified and wrote after the Mishnayos, Kamai Mishnas Rabbi Chia, the Tanaitic material of Rabbi Chia, Mishnas Rabbi Oishia, Mishnas Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Remember, the Gemara sometimes says Mishnas Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Kav V'Naki. So anything taught after the era of the Mishnah is called a Braisa. Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael, the Mechilta of Rabbi Yishmael, V'Oisiyos de Rabbi Akiva, V'Toiras Kayanim, which is the Sifra, V'Sefer Vayikra Levad, the Sifri, which is Bamidbar Sinai, Ve'ela Advarim Kiyotze Behem. How do you know when something's a Braisa? Tana Rabbanan. By the way, Taf Reish. What's Gematria of Taf Reish? 600. This comes like a leftover from the 600 Siddharim. Or V'Tani Chada, or Tanya Idach. And if there's no machlokes, it's halacha mekuyames. Bottom line is, what does he call Mechilta? Mechilta of Rabbi Yishmael is something that came after the time of the Mishnayos. So now I want to share with you something interesting. Because Rabbi Shmuel Hannagid is saying that Mechilta came after the time of the Mishnayos. As opposed to what? What about Medrash? Medrash is not a commentary on the Mishnah. Medrash is a commentary straight up on the Psukim. So it means Medrash is earlier than Braisa. Braisa is after the time of the Mishnah. Medrash is earlier. There's an interesting Gemara in Kedushin. What if, we have a chas on here. Let's say somebody says to their kala, marry me on condition that I learn Chumash. And I'm not none of the suggestions that I'm giving now are recommended to a chassan in 2023. Just, let's say, like back in the day. Just keep with I would keep with the regular program. Whatever they tell you, Harei Mikudeshesli, that don't make any it's not a time for stipulations. But back in the day, they used to make stipulations. In yeshiva, one of the biggest jokes, one of the best jokes was, you have a chakira. What's pshat in a migu? Is a migu, is it a raya or koyach hatayna? Or is chazaka din or din birar? So what difference does it make? The difference is if you marry a woman on condition that what pshat of chazaka is. So if you say, that's the nafkamino. You could always, every time there's some kind of like hairline split, you say, what difference does it make? Difference is if you marry a woman on condition that this is the correct way to view it. Okay, so Gemara says, let's say you marry a woman on condition that I learn Chumash. So you have to be proficient in all the psukim of Chumash, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. Let's say you say to a woman, marry me on condition that I am Shoineh. So Chizkiah says you have to learn Halacha. The Rif says that means Mishnah. Fine. Let's say you tell a woman on condition that I'm a Tana. That definitely don't do. Okay? Say, Hare at Mukudeshas li amana shani Tana. So the Gemara says, until you have to learn Mishnah, Sifra, Sifri, and Tosefta. You hear? If you tell a woman, this looks like this is going somewhere, I would like to marry you on condition that I'm a Tana. So what do you have to learn? Mishnah. Okay, Mishnah we know. Sifra is on Vayikra. Sifri is Bamidbar Devarim. Tosefta is the remnant of the Mishnah. So Rav Moshe Shmuel Shapiro asked, it seems like the Brisker Rav, why didn't the Rishonim say you need to learn Mechilta? Right? I mean, this could happen, and this is a very important question. This could happen at any time. Anyone you know could go over to a woman and say, marry me on condition that I'm a Tana, and you're not going to know what to do. How much do you have to learn? No? I mean, guys in yeshiva, they're capable of anything. Right? So, why does the Gemara in Kedushin say that if you say to a woman, Amana Shani Tana, that you have to learn Mishnah, Sifra, Sifri, and Tosefta, why not Mechilta? Why not Mechilta? So the Brisker Rav said as follows. There's a very big difference between Sifra, Sifri, and Mechilta. Sifra and Sifri explain the principles of the Mishnah, but the Mechilta is explaining the words of the Chumash itself. Therefore, the Mechilta is not commentary on the Mishnah, it's commentary on the Chumash. But the guy told the woman, marry me on condition I'm a Tana. Tana means that I'm proficient in Tanaitic material. Mechilta is not considered Tanaitic material. It's considered material being Mevayer the Chumash, as opposed to Sifra, Sifri, which is Mevayer the Mishnah. The Meiri, in his Psicha to Masechta Avos, he says, by the way, who wrote the Sifra and the Sifri? Rav. Rav was what? He was a late Tana and an early Amora. So the Meiri says he was Megale, the secrets of the Mishnah. And now, then the Meiri says, there are other Chiburim, like the Mechilta, and the Psikta, and the Medrash, Rabba Tanchuma. So he groups Mechilta with Medrash. Medrash explains the Psukim. So Mechilta explains the Psukim. The Brisker Rav quoted the Sefer Mishmar Levi on Temura. Who wrote the Mechilta? So we saw the Mechilta was written by Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel was what? Tanya Amar Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. Tanya, it's a Braisa, so he's a Tana. So it was written by Rabbi Shmuel during Rabbi Shmuel's lifetime, before Rabbi codified the Mishnah, which means the Meiri holds, and it seems like others say the Mechilta, it preceded the Mishnah. Masha'in came, the Sifra and the Sifri was Rav, after the Mishnah. So if somebody says to a woman, marry me on condition I'm a Tana, so that's why the Rishonim say you need to know Sifra, you need to know Sifri, you need to know Tosefta, you don't need to know Mechilta. Mechilta precedes the Mishnah. You don't need to know Mechilta to be a Tana. You need to know Sifra, Sifri, Tosefta.
Does that fit with Rabbi Shmuel Hannagid?
But that doesn't fit with what we learned from Shmuel Hannagid. Why? Says the Brisker Rav, if you look in the Mavai HaTalmud of Shmuel Hannagid, Shmuel Hannagid identifies what's Braisa, anything written after the Mishnah, like the Mechilta and the Sifra. So we have a machlokes Rambam and Shmuel Hannagid, what is Mechilta? Is Mechilta like Sifra and Sifri, commentary to the Mishnah after the Mishnah? Or is it, like the Rambam says, it's something that explains the Psukim itself? And the Shmuel Hannagid is going l'shitase. How's that? Says because Shmuel Hannagid said, how many components are there of Gemara? No? 21. What's the second chelek? The second chelek is Braisa. And what is an example of a Braisa? An example of a Braisa is Mechilta de Rabbi Shmuel. So therefore, l'shitase, that Mechilta is a Braisa, he holds Mechilta is after the Mishnah. Right? Look in V'habraisa, right? It says V'habraisa kol hasfarim she'atiku hakadmoinim achar haMishnah. And one of the examples is of Mechilta de Rabbi Shmuel. So l'shitase, that one of the l'shitase, that he holds that Braisa is Mechilta de Rabbi Shmuel, that's going l'shitase, that one of the 21 parts of the Gemara is Braisa, which seems like it's a perush of the Mishnah, right? Here, Chaf Aleph Chalakim, Tosefta, Braisa, perush. Incorporated in Braisa is Mechilta. Now, if Mechilta is part of Braisa, that must mean that Mechilta is a commentary to the Mishnah, right? He's saying the Chelek HaBeis of Gemara is the commentary to the Mishnah. Included that is Mechilta. So that means he holds Mechilta as a commentary to the Mishnah, as opposed to other Rishonim who learn it's not a commentary to the Mishnah, but rather it's a commentary to the Psukim itself. So that's just an interesting ha'ara from Shmuel Hannagid. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us today. I wish you a wonderful day. Bracha l'hatzlacha. Chanani min hakasha omer. Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zakos Yisrael l'fikach achir b'am tar mitzvah shenemer. Adonai chafetz l'man tzidka yagdil tar v'yadir.